If you play TTRPGs long enough, you will experience disruptions to the status quo at the table. That might be a player getting a new job and having their schedule shift on you. That might be someone going off to school and having to reprioritize how they're spending their time. Multiple players might be dating each other and that relationship falls apart. Or you might just have a separating friendship. There's a lot of different things that can happen at your table that will lead to one or more players having to step back. Additionally, there might be things that happen in the game. You might have a plot line really focused on one character, and that character dies. And how does that push forward? Or you might simply have a player that wants to try out a new character, and that kind of disrupts the flow of the game as well. Each of these things, in their own turn, can be handled. However, if 2, 3, 4, 5 of these things are happening at the same time, you might feel like your table is crumbling. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Joshua of Milestone Play. I'm a professional game master, and this is kind of be the conversation we're going to have today. Typically, I'm standing up there giving more of a presentation, a lecture sort of situation, but that didn't quite feel right for this subject. Additionally, we're not going to take a break for the brand logo fanfare. That doesn't fit the vibe of this conversation. So we're just going to talk about what happens when your table falls apart. Recently, I had a player reach out to me about this happening in another one of their games. The game master had put in a ton of work and effort over quite a long time for this group that had fairly stable players, and all of a sudden things started to fall apart. We're not going to go into the specifics of what was going on at the table, that's not mine to share, but some of the things I listed at the beginning, as well as things I didn't list, you can use your imagination of all the things that will disrupt your table, were happening. And the player was looking for advice that they could pass on to this other game master to help them through this moment. The player was looking for a solution to the problem. The player was looking to see if I knew anything that could help the game master keep this all together. I answered, but it's not the answer that they would have wanted. And so I want to go through the answer I gave, the advice I gave for when it feels like your table is falling apart and there's nothing you can do. And hopefully it helps someone here. If you have your own experience in this, please go down in the comments, throw in your own advice, what you've done, what worked, what didn't. Aside from the people that see this video immediately, most people that see this video in the future are having a rough time, so be as kind as you can down there. But for now, we're going to go through the advice that I gave them. I might comment on it a little bit, but generally I wanted to share what I was thinking in the moment. I don't know if it was the best ideas, but it is the advice that I gave, and we'll see if you think it's advice worth giving. Before giving the advice, I prefaced it with simply acknowledging how bad the situation was. The situation is unfortunate, but it's not their fault. Life happens. No one enjoys this, and it is one of the hardships of the long-term hobby. If you have a pet, you will love them, and you will outlive them. If you play MMORPGs or any of the big online shooters, you can grow attached to the random players you collect, and then suddenly you notice the small status on a friend list, Johnny Boy 1317, last logged on 17 months ago, and realize you will never hang out with that person again, and never got to say goodbye. Luckily, in this hobby, you have the ability to do something with those feelings. In no particular order, but kind of. Now I'm going to stop us there just to acknowledge a couple things in that intro. One of the biggest things in that is a phrase that I've used with players many times. Life happens. As much as we love this game, as much as we love the stories, each other, the characters, all of it, it's a game. And other things come up in life, and you can't blame people for that happening. There's many times I've had players reach out 30 minutes before a game, hey, this thing just happened, I'm sorry I can't make it. And the major response I have, aside from thank you for telling me or thank you for letting us know, is simply that life happens. We're not putting blame anywhere, and certainly not your fault that you can't make it to a game. And so that's the biggest thing that I initially wanted the other game master to hear, is that life happens. Something else I'm doing in this intro is I'm alluding to something that's going to be coming later. I'm beginning to set the grounds for the tone of the advice I'm giving. I recognize that this isn't the advice that they're going to want to hear, so rather than blindsiding them with it, I'm setting it up as I go. So let's get into the advice. 1. Acknowledge it. Don't brush it away to the players or yourself and pretend it isn't happening or pretend like you can continue unchanged. This is a mistake I've made in the past, especially before Milestone Play. I used role-playing games to manage my social experience, to have a safe zone and a means of control in a situation that I generally have been uncomfortable with. I am not a social person. I have trouble with that sort of interaction. And so, if I could keep a game going and keep a game as the focus, it didn't matter what else was going on around, and games have suffered because I tried to continue on like nothing is happening when things were happening for the other players. So, first advice, simply acknowledge it, because things are going to change. Number 2, have an open conversation with the remaining players about whether they want to continue the same narrative. Okay, so very generic advice of talk to your players, talk to your friends, talk to each other. But it's an important step if you're not thinking about doing it. If you're not acknowledging it, you are certainly not broaching the subject. And so this bit of advice begins to lead through the rest of the advice, and it gives you a trajectory. I can't tell you what to do. I can't give the advice of how you should handle a situation. That's between you and your players. And the biggest question here is, with all these changes that are happening, do we want to change anything? Going forward, there's going to be advice for both the answer yes and no. And we'll start with no. Number 3 was, if not, find resolution. It is an absolutely sucky situation for all of that to hit together. For as many as possible, try to have a send-off or epilogue. That may mean finding conclusions to narratives or open-ended trajectories as characters ride off into the sunset with renewed vigor to figure the whatever the plot is, like a TV show that knows it's canceled before the final season finishes shooting, but leaving it open for a sequel series. This advice is really just giving a trajectory for planning the next session or two if the players don't want to continue on with this story. If you can, you don't want to just end it immediately, you don't want to cut it off, you want to find some closure, and so that's what this piece of advice is. It's just setting that trajectory to be able to find what closure can be found. Number 4, mourn and grieve. That may mean hanging out online and chat for an hour or two talking. That may be jumping on Hero Forge and making your version of the party. That may mean going to a bar. The specifics of this advice are kind of cherry-picked and random. I wouldn't necessarily do all of the examples for grieving and mourning here, and there's many that I did not list. I was simply trying to give some ideas of things you might do to allow yourself to get into that mindset of grieving and mourning the story, the characters, and the campaign that was lost. I personally have stayed online 2, 3, 4 hours after a campaign has ended and simply talked with the players that wanted to talk. Some people like making art, some people aren't really good at art in a way that they would be able to appreciate, so I've suggested going on to a 3D mini builder just as a way of being able to process that. You could equally go on to a Soul Calibur game or Baldur's Gate 3 or any other game with a big character creation beginning to the CRPG. You could go to Skyrim and just slowly go through, make characters, and kind of sit with them and think about them. Whatever you need to do to grieve what has been lost. I will call out that after I gave this advice, the player in time would send a thank you and didn't really think about grieving and mourning as they were processing the situation and as they messaged me. But over the course of the next week, there was a bit more of that realization, and this is the biggest advice probably of this entire set, and it's not helpful. It's not easy, it's not comfortable, but grieving and mourning is something people have to do. I was setting this up at the beginning when I was talking about having that friend from an MMORPG or an online shooter that you don't get to see anymore and you didn't get to say goodbye to. Also with the metaphor of loving a pet and outliving them, and taking those ideas and kind of using them to understand what you're going through can be helpful. You'll have your own similes, your own metaphors, your own analogies, but find a way to deal with all of the unspent enthusiasm, the unspent hopes and desires, the unspent time that you no longer get to have with these characters that you thought you would have. And so you have to find some way to process those emotions. Speaking of processing those emotions, number 5 of the list is actually also 3 and 4 combined, This is definitely a situation of, had I had more time, or rather, had I taken more time, I probably would have written a shorter letter, but we'll get on to number 5, which is a combination of 3 and 4. If you know what session is going to be your last in the current status quo, focus on everything the party has accomplished, not the unfinished. Have NPC cameos, call out quests, major items, locations. Don't worry about making it perfect or the most logical thing. Sit with the characters, sit in the space. Game masters can feel a ton of pressure to run a good game. If it is a climax to a story, the pressure goes up even more. If they had a bad game last time, they may feel that pressure to try to make up for it in this coming game. And when you see that a campaign is ending, if it's a planned ending, if you've seen it coming for a while, there's a ton of pressure. So if all of a sudden the status quo is changing and you realize, oh, I guess we're cutting this short, that pressure becomes almost insurmountable if you think about it having to be perfect. If you think about having to complete everything that is undone, make everyone happy, make everyone feel fulfilled, that is not your responsibility as the game master in this moment. If this is your final time to have with these characters, to have with the story, simply have the time. There are many times that I've spent with friends before going off to college ending, where we're not doing giant games, we're not going out and celebrating. It's that awkward time where everyone's packed up and you're sitting in a living room. Someone knows that they have to leave at 10 p.m. and then it's 10:30 and then it's 11 and you're just sitting there because you don't want to leave. And this is a way of structuring that final session to allow for the grieving during the game, to simply sit with the characters and sit with what you've done. You don't need a solid list of, hey, we did this, and this. Just acknowledge, remember, have callbacks, and just be there with the characters. And if people want to talk about something in particular, go with them. If someone tries to push a final little narrative, meet them there and just sit in that space, because this is a gift. You don't always get it, so if you have the opportunity to sit there with those characters one last time, just take the pressure off and be there. The final bit of advice I gave was not number 6. It was in fact number 3B, as we go back to the question of, do your players want to continue with the same narrative? So, 3B. If the remaining players want to continue the same narrative, maybe consider pushing the timeline forward after the loss, a regroup period. Give big reasons for the lost PCs to not be there. Change the objective. Whether it is a 3-month gap or a 10-year gap in the narrative, allow the players to interact with the same plot, but with a new start that honors what came before without having to refer back to it every session. Allow separation. This isn't something that I have had a lot of experience with. I've had it a little bit, but more so, I've had this when a campaign has ended and we move on to a new campaign. If we're playing in the same world space between the first campaign and the second campaign, I want things to be familiar to the players. I want what the players have accomplished to matter, but also I don't want them to have very close relations to the PCs of Campaign 1. I don't want there to be these constant reminders of this other game we were playing and having all of the jokes at the table be about the last campaign. You need time to build the new characters, or in this case, you need time to settle into the new status quo. Set things up so everything that happened before matters, but have a different trajectory. Have a different goal, have a different promise of what this campaign is going to be moving towards. Don't linger on the failures, don't linger on the loss. Allow for there to be moments of looking back, but don't have it be the center of the narrative, because you will continue to have to settle with what isn't at the table anymore. Leave space for returning players if the situation allows, but things have changed. Let's go back to advice number 1. Don't pretend they haven't. Find a way to continue the story in a new space, in a new era, whether that's a short time jump, a long time jump, but allow things to be new, because new helps wounds heal. So that's the advice I gave. I don't know if it's the best advice, but it's the advice that I felt I needed to give in that moment. It's certainly not the advice that was wanted, but hopefully it has helped in this situation of so much change and uncertainty. I have not checked in on the situation. That's not really my place. So please don't comment about things like that. But if you do have any suggestions for future people going through a moment where their table is in flux, where it feels like the campaign is falling down, crashing down around, because life happens, go ahead and leave that advice down in the comments. I will do a quick little shout out to my patrons on Patreon for helping support making videos like these. But aside from that, there's links in the description. Really isn't a happy video to advertise on, so we'll just leave it off here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for what advice you have shared below, and have a lovely